let's say it's always like that. Again, the whole thing with one picture isn't equally intensive as the other. Sometimes your frame rate just drops. There's nothing you can really do about it. Right now I have 60, but it's been to 40 like half a minute ago. Let's see. Yeah, now it's at 55. See, it's going down. 50. There was a drop to 50. Just some motion in it. It's just gonna drop. There was a 40 now. No, it's 40. You can kind of see it here. 42 FPS. 33. It's still not raw solid 60. And if you have a frame drop and you turn it down to 30, the video file still replies as 60 FPS. So you can kind of get in a problem with that. Just because if your video drops below 30, if your video drops below 40 or something, and they still only take, your rendering program only takes this, each secondary frame, which I don't think it does, but just theoretically, if you have a 60 frame image, your rendering program would just select like, and you want to turn it down to 30, you would just select every secondary image. That's just like the first, and the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth, and you just skip the other ones. And yeah, with a frame drop happening then, if you still apply that method, I don't know if it does, but I would assume so. If you have a frame drop in the actual recording, which can happen, it can be not noticeable for me, and lag not noticeable for me, but for you. It's a really minor one, but it just can drop below like 25, and then it's kind of getting critical, which just doesn't look smooth anymore. And the double of 25 is 50. So if it drops below 50, theoretically, you should kind of have some jaggies. Sometimes. Really minor ones. You barely notice them, but if you really want to, you can. And that's another problem. That's another great thing with 60. If it drops below, if it drops down to 30, no big deal. Or 40, no big deal. Really problem becomes if it drops down to 50 or something. But it's frankly not a problem with the format. It's just a problem with the recording in general, like the recording process and my graphics card and hardware and all that stuff. So yeah, 60 has a lot of benefits, and again, a lot of game developers, especially at the console level, they're just arguing over and over why you make a 60 FPS game. One thing that I really emphasize on a lot of my with a lot of my friends, and when they ask me like, can I play that at like the highest settings everywhere, and I always reply like, you can, but it would cost you a constant frame rate. Like if they have like a dated computer, and even sometimes it happens to me too. Like Crysis 3, I couldn't max out that game without remaining a constant frame rate, and recording on the other end too. So there's something to consider there. But what was I about to say? Kinda of it now. Gosh, I hate when that happens. Yeah, you can still max it out with every hardware that's available for every PC. You can still max out every game. It's just not all of them, but like hardware from 10 years ago, don't try it. But if you have like 5-year-old hardware, pretty mediocre hardware back in the days, and now it's basically bullshit, you can still max out every game. But the problem with that is you just want to have 5 frames per second or 10 frames per second. That's definitely not playable. So you always have to consider something for yourself. That's actually one great thing about being a PC gamer. You can always mess around with stuff, you can always tweak it, and you can always make it every way you want. Do you want it a little bit more pretty and sacrifice some performance, or do you want a really smooth gameplay and sacrifice some of the graphics fidelity? Personally, for me, it's like everything above 60, I can sacrifice everything above 60. But, and here it is, if I drop below 60, like in certain games, that's it. Like, say for an FPS, if you drop below 60, you're gonna have a bad time, or at least I have a bad time. I'm not used to it. Everything slows down for me, and I can't react. In a game like World of Warcraft, for example, it's not the biggest deal if it drops like below 30. Sometimes there's just some jaggy, and you can't. Honestly, in a game like World of Warcraft, in raids, that's always gonna occur in raids. When it occurs, it's gonna occur in raids. You just won't be able to hit like a 60 FPS with 40 men casting stuff on their screen. It's just not gonna happen, at least not on like my hardware level. And my hardware level is pretty good. If you're of course Total Biscuit with dual titans, you probably won't have a big problem, but quite frankly, no one else can afford that. Yeah. But back to the point. Some games it's okay, like to drop below 30, but in shooters, I actually played Call of Duty always at the 90 frame, at 90 frames. That had some other reasons though. The biggest reason for Call of Duty. First of all, I could max it out and still get 90 frames basically, without recording. That is, with recording would not really run that smooth. But without recording, I could max it out and still get around to 110, 110, 90. Sometimes it would drop below 90, but it would remain relatively stable. That is with Black Ops though, Call of Duty Black Ops. I have to say that. That's a disclaimer. Call of Duty Ghost runs nowhere near. You probably, even if you turn down the game like to its bare minimum settings, you will probably not gonna get above like 70. You can really be happy if you manage to reach like 60. It's just ridiculous. They just basically just put an emulator on it, and God, they just shoehorned that shit out and did nothing to optimize it for a game, for a PC. And even with the highest end hardware, it's available. Not even with I've seen other reports, and it's just not running good. That's definitely a possibility. That's definitely a problem. And even some games, like for example Crysis, look better and ran better at the same time than Call of Duty Ghost. That's bullshit. It shouldn't be happening. Like, what the hell? Your game looks shit, and it even runs like shit? Come on. Like, did you do like any optimization at all? But anyways, that's beside the point. You can choose your frame rate, and it's really, I think that console gamers should have the choice too. They should have choice between, like, especially with the limitations that the new hardware still has. Like the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 still struggling to get like around 1080p, which is a standard that I've personally been gaming on like around 10 since I think 2009, and now we have 2014 and we're looking towards 4K, and I'm actually thinking about adopting to 4K if I can get enough money, that is. Yeah, but we are looking at 4K. They are struggling to get 1080p, which I am again gaming on since around, yeah, for basically 5 years now. Well, yeah, that's just the thing. But anyways, that's beside the point. They should have the option. Some games even do that. Like the MMO, I think that was a Final Fantasy MMO. Was it? I don't know. One console MMO. I don't know. It's a fairly new one. It's still in beta, I guess. But it's doing fairly well, and it's realize the potential of it. Like, they have an option in place. If you want to play it at 1080p, it's locked at 30 FPS. If you want to play it at 60 FPS, you have to turn it down to 720p. They have two separate profiles in it. And that's basically what you should implement in every game. If you can't, and then again, if you can't manage to get 1080p 60 FPS, give them a choice. If they want to reach it at 30 FPS, fine. If they think that's 30 FPS is more than enough, okay. But there are a lot of games where 30 FPS isn't enough. And it's actually TV made a great point in that. Basically, they sacrificing gameplay ability for graphics with a lot of titles, and it's just so sad to see that. It just shouldn't be that way. They just treating their customers. They're actually the ones that give them all their money like total idiots. Saying that, oh god, 30 FPS is so much better than 60 because it's a more filmic look. No, it isn't. It's bullshit. Everybody who compares films to video games is lying. He's completely misguided, or basically he's paid off. Mostly of the time they're just paid off by Sony or whatever. The Order 66 developer, I can't recall the name, is the biggest example of that. He's just the first party developer for Sony. They don't manage to get 1080p 60 frames per second because the hardware is too bad, and now they're just arguing about stupid stuff like 30 FPS, 60 FPS would hurt the game because we are trying to get a filmic look. I've seen some trailers, I know what they mean with filmic look, but there's no reason they shouldn't. There's no... There is no negative to 60 FPS. There are only positives. 30 FPS is never beneficial in any way. The same way that 120 FPS is every time beneficial, more beneficial than 60. It's just a fact. You can't ignore facts. 60 FPS is better than 30. Although it's probably not all the time required, it still is better, and it enhances your gameplay. 60 FPS enhances your gameplay. It doesn't look shiny most of the time. You can basically, sometimes you can't even see the difference. Sometimes. Most of the time you can, but sometimes you don't really notice the difference. Besides from, and here it is, control inputs, because your input lag is reduced. Because you are controlling the one who is doing that. That's the biggest reason because why you can't compare a film and video game. In a film, you're basically just watching. And that's actually why gameplay footage on YouTube still functions. Because you're just watching, you're not the one controlling the game. It still looks better with 60. Always. It still always looks better at 60. But as a watcher, as the person who watches, you don't need it. It would enhance, again, it would enhance, but you don't necessarily need it. And I dropped the ball again. God damn, why does this keep happening? Oh gosh, I just hate it. I need to write that down. I need to write my thoughts on, but they're so spontaneous. Gosh. 60 FPS, 30 FPS, filmic look. Yeah, well, I'm back on track. With 60, with controlling a game, you have certain problems with it. Of course, the input lag, and it's always like that. If you have a game that responds quicker to your action, you just feel more immersed. Or it's just more immersive. It just does something right. If you have, of course, there's a barrier where the human can notice it. Like the human brain doesn't recognize a certain amount of lag anymore. It just